Hi, everyone. I'm Yewande Falion. I'm a former McKinsey consultant and Morgan Stanley VP turned founder, CEO, and certified leadership coach. I am so excited for you guys to join me for my very first LinkedIn Live, which is really, really exciting. I did my first Instagram Live last week, so this is becoming a bit of a habit for me. If you're in the audience and you're live with us, say hey in the comments just so I know who's there. And if you're joining later, just put a hashtag reply as I love to know who's online. All right. And I've got such a treat for you guys, my very first LinkedIn Live. On today's show, we are going to be talking about something that affects or has affected pretty much every single one of us. However, we often feel like we are alone in it. The thing is, imposter syndrome. So, have you ever felt imposter syndrome? If you have, again, whether you're live or you're watching this on replay, and if you are on replay, just put a hashtag replay. If you are, just type I have in the comments because I have no doubt how prevalent this is because I hear it so much and so often with my clients. So, what we're going to talk about today is first of all, what is imposter syndrome? Second, why it's so prevalent, especially amongst leaders and high achievers. Hi, Toby. Great to have you here. Third, why today is the day that you're going to drop it. And I'm really excited about that for every single one of you. And fourth, how you're actually going to do that. So let's start right at the beginning. What is imposter syndrome? It's that all too familiar feeling that many of us have, or we know, or we remember at some points, particularly in our careers, where we just feel like we aren't quite cut out for the job, right? It's not always there consistently, but it just feels like it's lurking in the shadows, right? You may feel out of place. Your job title or role feels like it's inflated. So there's a question mark around like, can I really do this thing? And there's often a fear that you are just one word, maybe one action away from your colleagues, your clients, your friends finding out that you really aren't as good as you think you are. Basically, you feel like you're an imposter in your situation, in your role, hence the phrase imposter syndrome. And I can totally relate to this. I spent 3 years at McKinsey. It was an amazing 3 years and just great in terms of growth, right? Every 2 to 3 months, I had a new project. I was working with really smart, really driven, fast thinking, hardworking high achievers and performers. People around me basically seemed supernatural just in terms of what they were able to achieve. And I was dropped into new projects, new industries, working with new super senior clients all the time, right? We were switching projects all the time. Um, but here's the thing, right? I chose to work at McKinsey. I wanted to learn fast. I wanted to work with the best. I wanted to try out new industries. I wanted to work with C-suite clients, right? And have the opportunity to fly across the UK, Nairobi, Lagos, working with heads of departments, heads of countries, of FTSE 100 companies in new locations, new industries, with super senior people. Like it was what I signed up for. But of course, I felt imposter syndrome, right? Because there was so much. So this is basically the reason why it's so prevalent amongst leaders and high achievers. Imposter syndrome thrives in the presence of new challenges, which is in the same town as where your ambition lives, right? In the same way that I was excited to go into all these new challenges, into all these crazy new areas, that's exactly what kind of drove or created a breeding ground for imposter syndrome because there were so many things to pick on. And what I often hear people say is in terms of benefits, imposter syndrome almost indicates that you're challenging yourself. You're pushing yourself to step up to the next level. You're pushing yourself into uncomfortable situations, right? And because you can't feel like an imposter if you're staying in your comfort zone. If you know what you're doing, you've been there for ages, you feel comfortable, you feel like you are almost the smartest person in the room, it's less likely to come up. However, although that may seem like a driving force, i.e., oh, this is a great way that I can show I'm stepping out of my comfort zone, imposter syndrome is actually driven by fear. And when you talk about your leadership, mastery, staying in your zone of genius, they don't thrive in fear. So the question is often, how do I keep that drive that imposter syndrome could maybe help me feel, but then reduce the fear that's actually holding me back? All right. So taking that a little bit further, this is why today is the day that you're going to drop imposter syndrome. One, you don't have to hold on to it. The feeling is natural. And again, when I think about my clients, so many of them experience it, but it is not necessary. And second, it actually holds us back and holds you back from your greatness in many different ways. To name a few things that come to mind, one, inaction. So if you feel like you're an imposter and you feel like you don't have a place where you are, then it stops you, right? Just you may have a reluctance to speak up or just take action for fear of saying or doing the wrong thing. And as I'm listing these things, if there's anything that you resonate with in terms of where you think your imposter syndrome might be holding you back, share it in the comments, because I think these are things that a lot of people experience, but we often don't recognize it because we think it's just us. So inaction's the first thing. Burnout. And I know a little bit about burnout because I've burnt out twice, but won't be doing that again. Burnout, right? We try to overwork and we try to prove that we're good enough so that we almost like push ourselves against the imposter syndrome to go, well, I am meant to be here. And we overwork to prove that we're good enough. And then that could lead to burnout. Slower learning, right? This could end up with us actually learning slower as opposed to faster because we have a reluctance to ask for help, again, for fear of being found out. Missed opportunities. We may feel like we're missing opportunity, or we may experience, missed opportunities to learn because we downplay our successes and our accomplishments because we don't recognize them for what they are. We assume that we are imposters in our role, therefore our successes don't matter as much. Slow down progress. So not just slow down learning, but slow down progress resulting from us maybe turning down new opportunities because you fear that you're not up for the job because you're already trying to deal with what's going on now. You think, well, if I push myself even more, someone else might find out. Impaired decision-making from second guessing ourselves, right? Again, imposter syndrome sits in the realm of fear and us not being our greatest. So even just making simple decisions become really difficult. And then it holds us back from really playing full out and achieving our greatest goals. And there's so much more, right? But I won't bore you with the long list. I see there's a question from Arun. Is imposter syndrome specific for introverted personalities or more generally for everyone? That's a really good question. Introverts, extroverts, structured people, people who are spontaneous, everyone, and I would say everyone experiences imposter syndrome because there's always an exception to the rule, but there is no demographic or type of person that experiences it one way or the other. It just shows up slightly differently. So if I think about the list that I just shared with you, if you think about an introvert may be more prone to inaction or not speaking up because that may be their place of comfort in terms of imposter syndrome. But the way it may show up for an extrovert is that they actually speed up a little bit and they burn out and they try to do everything and push forward and say everything, which means that they're not being true to themselves. So it shows up slightly differently, but it's a feeling that many of us experience, whether especially leaders and high achievers. All right. So now we know what it is, why it shows up, and why it's important for you to drop it today. The question is now, how do you actually do that, right? I will emphasize again, I do not have a single client that has not expressed some sense of imposter syndrome at some point in their careers, right? It may not be new, it may not be prevalent or showing up right now, but many of us have experienced it. And that often sounds crazy to me, given the type of clients that I work with, but we see it in ourselves. We don't often see it in other people. But we are able to work through it and get rid of it because one, it's just not of service to us. And where there's a will, there's a way. So how do you do that? The very first thing, and I love that you guys are putting some comments in the post, is just to recognize when imposter syndrome shows up for you. You can't beat it if you can't see it. Right? So there's one thing to recognize that you feel it, then there's another thing to recognize when it actually shows up and maybe even note like what's driving it. For some people, it could be when you are with particularly senior clients, right? Or people with a lot of experience where you're kind of questioning where you are versus where they are. It could be when you're a brand new environment or where you're in situations where you just feel uncomfortable. But recognizing it means that you can now tackle it. The second is then accepting that given your ambitions, given your drive, given your need and want to push yourself, imposter syndrome is totally natural, right? Don't beat yourself up about it. Don't judge yourself because now you're just kind of in that space of unconstructive energy. Accept it, but just recognize in that acceptance that because it's natural doesn't mean that it's necessary, which goes to the third thing, which is being a choice. So choose to focus on your strengths. Remember, the thing that you're afraid of, i.e., being found out, is not real. It's just a scenario that you've created in your head because of the unknown. Maybe choose instead to imagine a new scenario where your skills, your expertise, your ambitions, your drive, your strengths are actually shining, and then create that. And what that could look like as well is maybe looking at the imposter syndrome as, or the situation, maybe not the imposter syndrome, but the situation as an opportunity to grow, right? Recognize that you're the newest person on the team instead of focusing or choosing to focus on the fact that you may not know every intricacy about how things work. Choose to focus on the fact that that's actually a strength, because it's a strength because you're not coming in with a fresh pair of eyes. You can ask questions that may seem obvious, but they're questions that are really important because people who've been on the team for ages, for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, are just kind of take it for granted. Therefore, they're not as in tune with what might be going wrong that they haven't noticed. All right. Fourth thing, once you choose, is then to trust yourself. Think about all of your career and all that you've experienced so far. What challenge have you not been able to get through in your life? Like, really think about that. The fact that you're here and you're spending time watching this video probably means that you've gone through a lot of challenges, and the things that have caused you imposter syndrome or similar feelings of fear in the past are not things that necessarily would give you challenges now, because you've been through it. You've gone through those challenges. You will go through these challenges as well, right? So trust that you will get through it, and focus on that trust, and focus on that strength that we talked about before. And thanks for I've seen a comment that says, yes, the scenarios that we're playing in our heads are misleading. But the great thing about recognizing that is that you can then choose the scenario that will serve you. We're always at choice if we pause, become aware of it, accept it, be at choice, and then trust ourselves, right? Those are the first four. Then the fifth, become comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? I have a client who, we got to the end of a session, and this is probably one of my favorite actions that a client has ever mentioned for themselves. Because at the end of each session, we kind of think of an action that they then do, and then they come back. And she said, my action is to commit to failing miserably, right? When you don't fear failure or success, nothing can get in your way. So get comfortable with being uncomfortable, knowing and trusting again that you have got through everything else that you have in life, and you will now. And then finally, and I like to bring this on, bring other people along. As leaders, particularly, this is very important. We all feel imposter syndrome, or we felt it in a way, in different ways at different points in our lives and careers. So that's probably true for most people. And a lot of the people that you see that you think, oh my gosh, these are amazing. Like, I've spoken to my McKinsey colleagues who I was in awe of, and I still am, and they inspire me. And we've talked about the fact that we've all felt imposter syndrome at some point. So create an inclusive environment that helps your team to overcome their imposter syndrome so that you can amplify your collective successes. All right. Next steps. I often say that if you're not taking next steps, then you're missing out on a huge opportunity. So as much as it's great that you're with me and you're listening, the only way that you actually create change is to take a next step. So what I would suggest, if you want to get support in terms of, well, first of all, actually, going back through kind of some of the tips on how to release your imposter syndrome, pick one, pick two, focus on practicing those over the next week, and you'll be impressed by how much further you go. And then if you want to get support, getting rid of your imposter syndrome once and for all, so that you can really step up as a leader and create the success that you want, I've got two really cool things for you. One, feel free to join me and your fellow leaders and high achievers in my LinkedIn group, which is Next Level Leadership. Just connect with me, share your interest, and then I can send you a link. And then secondly, I'd love to chat with you. So I'm inviting you to join, to have a chat, just to see if you'd be a great candidate for my signature group program, which is the Legacy Level Leadership Accelerator. The doors are opening soon with a really exciting early bird enrollment. So if you sign up in the next couple of weeks, then you will get that. And we talk about all things really structured around leadership and around 5 areas of leadership. So self-leadership, thought leadership, people leadership, as well as leadership mindset and performance, which goes into imposter syndrome and all of this stuff in a lot more detail. So if you're interested, head over to otitoleadership.com. I'll put a link in the comments. And until next time, stay safe, stay focused, stay energized. Thanks for joining.